Welcome back to our discussion on Indian economy from 1950 to 1990. This is a very important period for our economy because immediately after we attained independence, we need to kickstart development. And we have seen in this chapter, previous videos, how the government tried to push forward agricultural production with the help of green revolution, land reform, and also set forth policies to develop industries by classifying industries and also encouraging the small scale sectors. And we have also seen policies to restrict import, especially so that we can become self dependent. And we remember the term import substitution, where instead of buying from outside, we substitute by domestic production. So, hold through this chapter, this very important chapter, because this is the base for Indian economy. Policies. What we need to look at in this video, the last part of the chapter is on the effects of industrial policies on industrial development. You'll learn about that. We'll list the effect, both the positives and the negatives, like merits and demerits of having these policies, whether they really help industrial development in the country. This is the last part of your chapter. And let's go first to the positive impact. Number one is the rise in the industry's share of GDP. GDP is our national income. National income is contributed by agriculture, industry, and service sector. And you can see from here, with the help of these policies, there has been an increase in the share of industrial development, industrial contribution to our national income. And how much is that? The proportion of GDP contributed by the industrial sector increased in the period from 12% in 1950-51, the start of planning and all those policies, to 25%. So in 1990-91. So out of 100 earning, 100 GDP, 100 income, 25, that is a quarter, comes from industry. That means industry has been able to contribute more, meaning there has been a development in industry. So the positive impact is, yes, having those policies have helped in the enhancement, increase in the income of the country. That's number one. Number two is that with the help of these policies, the country no longer able to produce only cotton textiles and jute. Now, with the help of policies, the industrial sector has become diversified. Diversified means they are able to produce other goods as well, other commodities, not only cotton, textile, and jute. Now diversified to steel, to, you can say, rubber, to oil, and many other automobiles. And this is possible because of these policies. Okay. Number three, we remember the important place small scale industries have in all these policies. That's why the promotion of small scale industries gave opportunities to those people who did not have the capital to start large firms to get into business. Many have talents, many people have that native entrepreneurship. They want to do something, but they don't have the fund. But with the encouragement of small scale industries by the government, many have been able to become owners, entrepreneurs, able to produce something and employ others. That's the third benefit, third positive impact. And lastly, protection from foreign competition. With the help of that trade policy, it enabled the development of indigenous industries, especially in electronics, automobile, which would otherwise not been possible. So now let's take a look at the weaknesses of those policies, or the negative impact of industrial policies on industrial development expected that industrial development would grow. And we remember the industrial policy in 1956, more importance was given to the public sector. That means government owned industries were expected to do more to bring about industrial development. But let's see whether that's the case or not. So this is the criticism, so to say, on the performance of many public sector enterprises, government-owned industries. Number one weakness is that these state enterprises, government-owned industries continue to produce certain goods and services, often monopolizing them, although this was no longer required. That means they stay in business to produce goods that was no longer needed for them. They need to give space to other, give chance to other, especially private sector. But that's not the case in India. Example given here in telecom service. If given to the private sector, the telecom service would have been better like it is today. And that time you have only one service like BSNL. It's not it. So that's why we need to do more. That is the criticism on that part. And also the second criticism on the modern bread manufacturing unit, a government industry producing bread. So you understand that is the criticism. Others can do it. So why did the government continue to do it? It should leave away that part. It's not it. Should give to the private sector. So that is one weakness, that it keeps on um, producing things that are no longer required for the government to do. Number two weakness is that because of this persistent in the public sector, no distinction was made between what the public sector alone can do and what the private sector can also do. That means there is a mix up because of mixed economy. Sometimes the government, like we've said from number one, continue to produce things that are no longer required for them to produce. They don't understand, fail to understand what it can alone do and leave private sector, or what can both do. It's not it. And you understand that those that the private could do should be given to them. That means the public sector should give way to private sector. But here in India, during this time, it was not the case. And you talk about things like national defense um, for like material warfare materials. No? These things that can also be done by the private sector, but it's still exclusively monopoly of the government. Even though private sector can manage hotels well, yet the government also runs hotels. These are the the areas of private sector, but the government still, it doesn't understand its function, whether it should continue with it or leave it to the private sector. So that is the weakness of these policies. And the state, therefore, should get out of the areas which the private sector can manage well. And the government may concentrate its resources on important services which the private sector cannot provide. Okay, case today is different from case in this period 1950 to 1990. Now somehow all these criticism has been rectified, all these weaknesses. But during those days, the government took too long to understand its role on what areas should it run, produce, and what areas should be given to private sector. So that's why there is a waste of resources. There's a ways of public sector units. It's not it. They should have done better in other areas than doing what private can do. So that is the second weakness. Number three, many public sector firms incurred huge losses but still continue to function because it's difficult to close a government undertaking, even if it is a drain on the nation's limited resources. You keep producing, selling, but running at a loss. You see that in many government owned industries, isn't it? They have to pay salaries to many of its employees, but still run without profit. Isn't it? So that is the problem with these policies. Too many government owned industries, too many loss making, eating up the resources of the country. So this does not mean, by saying so, does not mean that private sector are always profitable. But we understand private sector can perform well, can manage well, not it. But if given to them, no? So public sector should get out and close down those loss making so that the resources of the economy can be utilized elsewhere, utilized for the benefit of the economy. That means there will be less wastage. No? That is the thing that we can say, the third point that we can say, that there are laws making public sector undertakings, they should be closed down, no? Should be given to private sector. So that we understand, if given to private sector, they will not waste resources by keeping running despite the losses, but the government will keep on running, keep on. They will not close down even if it's lost because they have resources to from other areas to maintain that even at a loss. So that is the huge waste for the nation's national wealth. We can say resources. Number four, the need to obtain. We remember that in a policy there is a need for license for private sector, but sometimes the need for license to start an industry was misused. There is always a loopholes, and misused by whom? By big industrial houses. These big industrialists, they, you understand, they have a command in the economy, they have a say. Sometimes they can misuse that, no? A big would get a license not for starting a new firm, but to prevent competitors from starting new firms. They, if they were on in that business, they don't want new entries. That's why they will do such a thing that they themselves would get a license so that to deter other competition, so that they will earn profit from themselves. So this is the misuse of the policy, not all, but sometimes by these big houses, industrial houses. Okay, so you understand those licensing policy. During that time, we call it the permit license Raj. So this permit license Raj, which you need to require a license, takes time. So sometimes there are firms, there are individuals who want to set up industries, companies, but they fail to get because sometimes it acts as a deterrent, no? um, Restricting the deserving ones. So that's why those who are already in business they earn, but those who want to start new business they fail to get one. It takes time for them. Sometimes they don't get at all. So that's the misuse sometimes by these big industrial houses. That's the fourth weakness. The last, the fourth, the fifth weakness is that uh, coming from trade policies where there was restriction in import, especially from tariffs and quotas to remember. And so because of that restriction, we people from India had to buy whatever produced by Indian firms, Indian industries. So whether quality good or bad, we have no choice. So that's why sometimes these producers, these companies, they are taken for granted that we have to buy from them. They understand they have this captive market, they have already captured the market. So that's why they had no incentive to improve the quality of the goods. They know produce lower standard of goods to get more profit, they will always get a market because people didn't have a choice. So that's the problem, the issues number five. And lastly, the public sector the public sector is not meant to earn profit but to promote the welfare of the economy. The intention to set up public sector, you remember the policy is to bring about it was to bring about the regional equality so that there is no distinction between the east and the west, north and the south. There should be parity in development of industries. It's not it. So the intention of public sector was not to earn profit, but to bring about welfare of the people, development of the country. Okay, so the public sector, in this view, should be evaluated on the basis of the extent to which they contribute to the welfare of the people and not to the profit they earn. So what public sector should do is to produce, of course, when the others cannot produce, when private sectors are not ready to produce. But once there is possibility from them, public sector should give way. It's not it. And they should do for the welfare and not for the profit. So that is the diversion from what the government thinks and what the critics think of the role of the public sector. So those are um, the negative impacts, the ill effects, the shortcomings of all those policies on the industrial development. Okay, so that's about chapter 2, Indian economy, 1950 to 1990. So what you've learned, you can now discuss the effects, both positive, negative, like merits, demerits of industry policies on industrial development. You list those effects, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That will do the job.